Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you, and thank you for joining me for another spirit review video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a couple of bottles from one of my personal favorite distilleries, Ben Nevis. Now, if you're a Scotch head, a big aficionado, you probably already know what Ben Nevis is. And if you're not, then I should tell you that Ben Nevis is one of those distilleries that is fairly sought after. Okay, so it's usually independent bottled, so you'll be see whether it be like Ingelred or Berry Brothers, it'll be an independent bottler situation for Ben Nevis. But the thing to know about Ben Nevis, the distillery itself, is it actually goes back to like the early 1800s in its first production. I want to say it was like around 1825 ish, and they were a malt and grain distillery. Okay, so they were doing both, and then throughout the couple hundred years there. They did close down a couple times where they got mothballed for several years in a row. But in 1990, Nika actually bought them. So once Nika bought them, they resumed production, haven't stopped since, but they no longer do any grain whiskey. So if you see Ben Nevis nowadays, it's going to be single malt. Okay. Um, why do people love Ben Nevis? It's mostly because sometimes there's this really it has a really great malt characteristic to it, big, heavy, weighty whiskey, and then it also will tend to have this kind of fun, funky element to it. All right. And to me, I like to see that happen a lot in ex-bourbon cask. So we have one of those right here, so you can tell by that color. And then this is a PX cask, and you can tell by that color that it's had some good influence from it. Now, when I happened to see these on the shelf, they were in these boxes. Ingelred was a independent baller that I was not really familiar with because I hadn't seen it around, but they happened to have like 6 or 7 single casks of Ben Nevis at the time, most of which I think 4 of them were 11-year-olds in PX, Oloroso, Marsala casks, some really high ABV over 60%. And then they had this 15-year-old in a PX cask, and it was 50.2% ABV with a price point of about I want to say this one was 150. Not cheap, but a good PX cask Ben Nevis sounded pretty interesting. Now the other one I saw, and they only had one of these, so I happened to grab it, was a 17-year-old ex-bourbon at 56.1% ABV. So I love Ben Nevis in its ex-bourbon cask form just because, again, purity of the distillery really kind of comes through. So we're going to take a look at these. The 17-year-old at 56.1% was retail priced at about $230. So 150 for the 15, jumping all the way up to 230 for the 17. Stung a little bit, but that's where we're at. All right, so let's go ahead and get to the nosing and tasting. I will say, people will say about Ben Nevis, what is that or why does it have that name? It just happens to go for a big mountain that's right there called Ben Nevis. All right. All right. Here we go. Oof. Immediately on the nose, it's beautiful. It's slightly overripe golden apples, some nice pears, good ripe pears. These aren't overripe here. Big raw honey, big weighty, again, malt character is pure in this one. It almost knows like if you had a handful of that malted barley and you were just smelling it right there in your hands. Baking, again, this one has a little baking spice to it, the cinnamon, maybe a little pinch of nutmeg. You get out to that edge of that glass, you'll pick up a little bit of the fruit here. That being, again, going into like, this one goes into plums. Again, these are sour plums, overly ripe. There's some leather in here, some chocolatey, dark chocolate tone as well. It's really complex for what it is, but let's go ahead and give it a taste. Oh my goodness. And it just keeps driving. That's what I'm noticing here. I'm I usually take that first sip to try to check viscosity and check for transitions along the way. And this one is just punching, driving the whole way through. Lots of big flavor. It does do one really nice transition right at the mid palate where it drops into this really dark character. But let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. All right. Um, the honey malt, I will say that is the backbone of this whiskey. Raw honey, malted barley, purity. There is a little bit of like orange zest, adding a little zing, little tanginess to it. But the fruits definitely are darker. They're more into that really almost fermented plum, um, some cherry aspect, real natural tasting cherries. You could talk me into sour cherries. I would go with sour cherries that are really ripe again. Some pear characteristic, really ripe sweet pear. And I'm fighting off those back notes because again, it's already transitioned here. So like, as soon as you hit that spice swell on the mid palate where you get, and it doesn't even drink 112.2, doesn't even drink it. But when you get to that mid palate, you're going to pick up that nice cinnamon, that clove tone, and then it just drops off the edge and it starts driving really hard into dark chocolate, old leather, coffee beans, roasted coffee beans, and oak on the back end. But it's very sweet and rich because, again, you got that honey and malt running through the whole thing. I really like how it goes somewhat funky with as far as the fermented plums and the sour cherries that are overly ripe. But the honey and pear and those golden, there's like golden apple in there. Golden apple, golden, I don't even go, I'll go as far as going golden raisin because, again, we're getting into those concentrated fruits. Then you got that big weight of that malt and honey. It's amazing. Fantastic. Even at $230, I don't feel like that was over. I don't feel like the price to quality ratio is out of balance there. I would like for it to have been around 180 personally, but what are you going to do? And this is going to be one of those going to take multiple rinses because the viscosity wise was just almost medium high. I mean, it was almost medium high viscosity. So it's very rich, mouth coating whiskey. Okay, now we're going to go to the 50.2% 15-year-old. So we're dropping proof, but we are going into PX Sherry Cask. Now, I guess the one thing I should have mentioned before we push too much further, all the information is right here on the very front. Their Ingelred's motto, I guess, is whiskey with an edge. This is cask number 398 on the bourbon cask. Distilled May of 2005. Bottled April 2023. It's bottle 10 of 248 for this one. And then over here for the 15, they say this is coming out of cask 609, a PX Sherry Cask finish. Distilled in August 2007, bottled April 2023. Bottle number 21 of 302. And these are 700 ml bottles. I will say there is a little bit of residue accumulating at the bottom. Could be a little barrel char. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Oof, really, really nice. This one actually has a little more of that funk that I traditionally associate with Ben Nevis is in the PX cask here. And it goes into like it's almost like if you go to a cheesemonger and you're smelling that kind of Danish or the blue cheese at a distance, right? That's in this glass. It's not in your nose. No, it's not super pungent, but you'll pick it up. There is a little orange oil in this one. Definitely a lot of clove. A lot of those dried fruit character like cherries and raspberries, plums, figs, some nuttiness. The thing that I was choking up there was I was noticing that immediately I could pick up that kind of very similar dark chocolate characteristic in that leather and that this one had. This one also has it, even at only 15 years old. This one definitely smells a little sweeter than the 17. But 50.2%, 100.4 proof. Let's taste it. Oof, it is sweeter, but not too sweet. This one is, oh, and it does transition and go down dark. This one is fantastic. I'd say it starts in with those kind of like maple, the brown sugar. It goes into molasses tone. You get those red fruits, those dried red fruits of cherry and raspberry, the plums, the figs. The spices are more complex at the mid palate. Here you're into like, um, there's a little cardamom in there with this cinnamon and clove and nutmeg and anise. There's a nice nuttiness to it, almost like almonds, sweet almonds and pecans. And again, cocoa, leather, chocolate on the back end to go with that really nice oak. Fantastic whiskey at $150. 230, the 17 was great as well. I don't think you can go wrong with them. Even if I was spending the $100 on the 11-year, I think it's a really good bargain. I hope you enjoyed this video review. If you did, please consider joining us over at patreon.com/LiquorHound. That's how I'm able to fund this channel and keep purchasing these bottles to review for you, because I know a lot of us wouldn't take a chance on something we don't know anything about. But with my patron support, I'm able to do that so that I can stumble on these little jewels. Of course, my patrons are going to get these videos ad-free and 2 weeks early before they ever drop on YouTube. I do a lot of videos that are only for my patrons, and there's a whole review library there as well. So if you can, join us over at patreon.com/LiquorHound. But if not, I greatly appreciate each and every one of my viewers. Keep leaving all those great comments, and I'll get to them just as soon as I can. Everyone have a great day, and cheers.